Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now, I decided to make this video because I wanted to share thoughts with you guys about Vice President Yemi Osinbajo's recent narrow escape from a helicopter crash. Now, I am sure a lot of you, if not all of you, would have seen clips of that helicopter crash, and if you have not seen a clip of the helicopter crash, I might well insert it here. Jesus. Then again, I might not, but then the helicopter crash itself is not really what is important. What is important is what's led up to it, what do we read into it, what are the consequences of it, why did it happen, how did it happen, and what does it mean, etc. So really this is what we're looking to explore with this video. So now, when that the helicopter, of course, crashed in a place called Kaba, I think it's called, in Kogi State. I think it crashed either inside or round about a stadium in Kogi State. And the reason that the company that owned the helicopter adduced for that crash was it was attributed to unusual weather conditions. So that's the reasons adduced for the crash by the helicopter owners. And I say the helicopter owners, I will come back to, we will address that in the course of this video. But the reasons adduced by the helicopter owners for that crash was unusual weather condition. That's one reason. And then another reason that was also put forth was that one of the propellers came off. So unusual weather conditions, and one of the propellers came off. I mean, we've all seen clips of that crash, and hopefully I have left the clip rather on this video, so you would have had a chance to see it as well. So whether it's one of those reasons that is being given, whether it's all of those reasons that is being given, whether we can actually say that we see from the video the propeller actually coming off, whatever happened, it did happen. So, but why did it happen though? They said the incident was an accident, but was it? Some of you may recall that in June 7, 2018, a similar incident also happened to the same chap, the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. So in June 7, 2018, Yemi Osinbajo was coming back from an event when he went to mark the passing out of a class from the Nigerian Customs and Command Staff College. So he was coming back from that, and that was somewhere in Abuja, when his helicopter that he was in, I should say, suddenly started to smoke and had to force land, which was effectively a crash land as well. So that was June 7, 2018. So now we're in February 2019. So within the space of just over 6 months, we have had two incidents of the Vice President of Nigeria surviving a helicopter crash. So now we really now have to explore why this is. So now you recall earlier I was saying the owners of the helicopter, the helicopter that crashed in Kogi State, the recent one, the latest one they were talking about, and it's even really frightening that we're saying the latest one, you know, because obviously it's a recurring theme. But the owners of these helicopters were, of course, this helicopter rather that crashed was, of course, privately owned. So this was a commissioned helicopter that was hired to fly the Nigerian Vice President. The helicopter belonged to a private company called Caverton, and not only did the helicopter belong to a private company called Caverton, the pilot piloting the helicopter was a foreigner as well. So a foreign-owned helicopter being flown by a foreign pilot crash landed in Kogi State, and the Vice President of Nigeria narrowly escaped with his life. So now let's pause and explore that for a moment. Now, Nigeria is the 5th largest oil producing country in the world. I think is it at the 5th or the 6th or the 7th. It fluctuates, it gravitates between those numbers. Well, it's one of the top 10 certainly oil producing countries in the world. It's the largest economy in Africa, the largest black population on the planet, the biggest black democracy. So the Vice President of Nigeria is effectively the number 2 citizen of that country. So if we're using loose terms of definition, then we would say that Buhari is the number 1 citizen of the country. And then if Buhari is the number 1 citizen of the country, then it stands to reason that Yemi Osinbajo is then the number 2 citizen of the country. So now the number 2 citizen of Nigeria, with the country that I've just described, the biggest this and the biggest that, and very wealthy country, because have no doubt Nigeria is one of the wealthiest countries on this planet. It may be one of the most impoverished, but it's all certainly, without a question of a doubt, one of the wealthiest countries on this planet. So you have the Vice President of one of the wealthiest countries on this planet. And by the way, let me just pause and digress a little bit. Every single year, when they read out the budget, you hear all these colossal sums being allocated to the security services, and you hear all these colossal sums being allocated to the presidency. I mean, we heard the budget for the Aso Rock Clinic the last time, which was over 60% of the budget for the health services of the whole nation, only for the wife of the president to then come out that they don't even have aspirin in that billion dollar budgeted for clinic that they have in Aso Rock. I digress. But then you have all these huge billions of dollars being allocated to all of to the armed services, to the police, to the presidency, etc. Because they're saying they're using it to buy, they're budgeting it for them to buy equipment. So then you would think, like the United States has Air Force One, and every other nation has a fleet for the service of their governance, that Nigeria too would have a fleet for the service of their governance. They certainly budget for it every year, and they budget for it in the billions of dollars bracket. So billions of dollars are budgeted for equipping the functions of governance and for security services. So you would think then, and there's absolutely no reason why it should not be the case, that there will be a fleet of aeroplanes and helicopters available to the presidency. There should be a fleet of that because they budget for it. There should also be a fleet of aeroplanes and helicopters available to the armed services, all arms of the armed services, the Navy, the Air Force certainly, and the Army certainly as well. There should be a fleet of aeroplanes and helicopters available to these services. There should also be a fleet of aeroplanes and helicopters available to the police services. And the reason why there should be a fleet of aeroplanes and helicopters available to all these services is because over the last 60 years of independence of that country, every single budget cycle allocates billions of dollars for the purchase of a fleet of helicopters and aeroplanes for these services. So there's absolutely no reason why there should not be at least 3 or 4, if not 5 to 7 helicopters that is dedicated and exclusively for the usage of the vice president, so that whenever he has cause to travel around the country, there's about 4 choices of helicopters available, all in pristine condition, so he can just walk down and just hop into one of them, and he goes to where he has to go within the country, do what he has to do, and come back to where he has to come back to. That should be, as a matter, that should be par for course. There should be absolutely, that there shouldn't even be a thought about that. That should just be something that is. But that is not the case, though. Not only is that not the case, that there are no helicopters or all this sort of equipment available for the vice president. There's not even enough of them within the presidency itself, to the point where the vice president can have usage of one, and is now to that point where they have to go and hire commercially. And not only do they have to go and hire commercially, they have to go and hire from a foreign firm, to have a foreign pilot, have custody of the life of the second citizen of the country. So that's one element. Now, the second element is there's a bit of palace intrigue at play here. By my reading, I'm not quite sure if this next theory that I'm about to propose is conspiracy theory gone mad, but then I'll propose it, and then you guys can feedback to me through via the usual quarters. So now, the one thing that the Buhari regime is noted for is for its nepotism. This is the most nepotistic regime that has ever been in the history of Nigeria. Is wall-to-wall Hausa Fulani. Every appointment is Hausa Fulani. They make no apologies for it. If your name is not Danladi, you are not coming in. If your name is not Abubakar, you need not apply. If you are not called Usman, then please get out. And if you are called Uche, then please don't even come anywhere near, because if you come anywhere near, they will shoot you. So that's just the way they're running things. You know, if your name is not Danladi, you are not coming in. So now, we now have that as a given with this regime. So now that they've not established that as a given, they have now tried to ratchet it up to a new level. So now we have the governor of Kaduna State, El-Rufai, now coming out in recent months that for his re-election, he is going to have a Muslim Fulani ticket, i.e. is going to pick a running mate who is exactly his carbon copy, which is Fulani, Muslim, and male. So El-Rufai, of course, is Fulani, Muslim, and male. So he's now going to pick a Fulani, Muslim, and male as his running mate. Nothing wrong with that, you would think, but then you have to reflect on the state that he governs. El-Rufai governs Kaduna State. Kaduna State rather, is effectively a 50-50, or at least a 55-45 mix of Muslim Christian. So it's almost an equal mix of both religion, and is a very volatile state as well, because you only have to drop a pin or cough the wrong way and there's riots on the street in that state. So it's a state that functions on a hair trigger. So, and for balance, really, it is convention in that state to have a Christian, a Muslim Christian, a Christian Muslim ticket, so that at least there's some semblance of balance, and then the varying populations within that state would find somebody within the state, the governance apparatus that they can coalesce behind. So now this used to be the structure, but this guy is now saying he was to break that structure. So now he has now done this, but before he did this though, he went to Aso Rock to discuss it with Buhari. This is now something that's emerged, that before he made that public pronouncement that he's going to run a Muslim ticket in Kaduna, and woe be damned whoever woe be damned, effectively, you know. So before he made that decision to do this, he ran it past Buhari. So Buhari obviously assented to this. And now, what is this? This is really a test case for this as a template of a future plan. So now, what are we then taking from that to what we started off from, which is the frequent plane in the incessant helicopter, I keep saying plane crash, is a helicopter crash, the incessant helicopter crash that the Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, has been contending with. So now, we now have three elements now, so let's recount, so we're both on the same page. So we've had Yemi Osinbajo having this series of near escapes of helicopter crashes. We have this nepotistic regime of Buhari, who's intent on a Fulani hegemony of some sort. Now we do not have this Muslim ticket that El Rufai is now establishing in Kaduna State. So we have just three elements. So now let's introduce a fourth element, which is Buhari himself. Now, anybody that's been following things over pretty much the course of the whole Buhari regime would have come to the realization that Buhari, that is now the president, is not the Buhari that was. This is Buhari that's debilitated in health. He's very frail. He doesn't seem to have any full possession of himself anymore, and it doesn't really appear as though he's a man that can navigate the country for another 4 years, that can straddle and lead the country for another 4 years. That seems absolutely clear, and that seems even more clear every time you see him in public. There's absolutely no doubt about that Buhari really doesn't have all of the accoutrements, the energy, the wit, the wisdom, the vim, the verve. He doesn't really have any of the attributes that you need anymore to lead a country for another 4 years, because he's clearly a man on the wane. But everybody knows this. But what's going to happen then is they're determined to have a Buhari presidency anyway. So they're determined to have a Buhari presidency, and that is what they will announce after the June 16 elections. So after they've then announced the June 16 elections, but then it is pretty clear that Buhari would not be able to serve the course of the 4-year term, then what happens? So if Buhari then gets to that point where he needs to step down from the post, then we then have a Goodluck Jonathan type situation on our hands. So this is what we now have. So if Buhari is then in that position, and he will get to that point where it's no longer feasible and it's absolutely impossible for him to just carry on with the pretense, then he would be forced to really step down. So if Buhari then gets to that point where he probably needs to move himself back to Daura and go and settle in his home, then we then find ourselves in a place where Yemi Osinbajo is the next port of call. But then, of course, they've already had that experience with Goodluck Jonathan, and they've taken the learning from it. So, but then the Constitution makes it so that Yemi Osinbajo has to take that post if Buhari decides that he's not able to carry on anymore. So now, what do they then do about this Yemi Osinbajo situation? But if so that's really where the question is, because if Yemi Osinbajo was not in post, then they've already established their history of nepotism. They've already now gone through testing that Muslim thing in Kaduna State. So if Yemi Osinbajo is no longer in post, then there's absolutely no reason, nobody will be caught off guard if they then just slot in El Rufai as the vice president. So if El Rufai El-Rufai is slotted in as the vice president. All the outcries that will engender will be tempered down by the counter argument of the Muslim ticket that's already been established in Kaduna State, and obviously the nepotism that's already run through the whole governance anyway, because everybody is already used to the fact now that any position in government is occupied by a Hausa Fulani man and nobody else under this regime. So that's established. So now, if they've now established that Muslim ticket as a mindset, as an established norm in Kaduna State, if Yemi Osinbajo is then no longer in post, then really slotting El-Rufai into Yemi Osinbajo's seat is that much easier, and this is the play that I see. So now, I did say it was a bit like conspiracy theory gone mad, and I know that a lot of what I am saying in this video is very fanciful and very far-fetched, but how far-fetched is it? How fanciful is it? What are your thoughts on what is being said? Am I completely off-piste? Have I lost my mind? Is this crazy talk? Or what is your reading of this perception that I'm putting forward? Let me know what that reading is in the comment section, so that, because that's usually where the conversation takes place on this channel. So I'll leave you here, and I'll meet you in the comment section, and I'll say peace.